Hello, students. This week in Social Problems class, we are jumping to week 5 that talks about family and social problems within the family on a micro scale that affects society on the macro scale. And so I wanted to begin with a little bit of review and mental exercise, I guess, to make sure that we are thinking of family, that we know how to think of family on the macro scale, right? So it's very, very easy. And certainly before you had sociology class, I'm sure you probably never thought of family as anything other than a micro scale thing. Who's in your household compares to who's in my household. But in societies, there are different formats that are expected for a family. And we have to be sure that we are thinking from a sociological perspective and using a sociological definition of family. I don't know what Siri would say if you asked Siri, what does family mean? I don't know what dictionary.com says when you look up the word family in dictionary.com. Those definitions are not going to be applicable here because we in sociology have to make sure that we include a definition for family that is general enough to cover any and every society that we can apply it to. So we need a good sociological definition of a family, and worldwide, this very general list, you could say that it's bullet points here. I didn't put it as bullet points, but you could say it's bullet points. This very general list of things that I have here, worded very, very generally. We have to do it this way in sociology class to make sure that it can apply to as many examples around the world as we can find. So people have to live together. In general, the assumption is on the macro scale that if you are family, you live together, you cooperate economically. That is, you share things, the household mortgage, the rent, the milk in the refrigerator, the cost to buy a new refrigerator when you need a new one, these kinds of things. You share in this. And so there's also shared rights and privileges. I don't know if I intended to write share, but I'll put shared. I'll correct that and say shared rights and privileges. A family is someone who is a unit of people who, by design and society, have legal rights or expected rights and privileges over the other people. So for instance, if this has to do with marriage in our society, so I will link this to marriage. So in our society, marriage is typically the assumed thing that the assumed institution that people will enter into prior to caring for children, having children of their own and caring for children on their own. That was the traditional, the typical, the historical way of making family in this society. And so, for instance, that marriage that was a typical assumption of family for so many decades and years in Western society is not necessarily an expected component of who makes up your family here today in modern times. But traditionally, not when I say traditionally, I don't mean from like any kind of religious tradition. I mean traditionally from the economic structure, the historic structure in the USA, the legal structure in the USA. Because in general, the very basic definition of marriage is a union that follows the social expectation for what a marriage is in that society. A union that follows the socially approved of pattern in a culture that makes up a marriage. In the USA, our pattern is a legal pattern. And so when I go get a marriage license, $60, $80, whatever it is, you have to go get a marriage license at the courthouse. You have to find someone who is also licensed to act on that contract and validate it, a justice of the peace or a religious official who has that the power vested in them to act on that contract, and then you get it I guess not really notarized by that person, but signed off on by that person. You go back and you register it with that same court that you did before to say, see, we went through with this legal union. And so, for instance, some of the rights that come in a family when you have a legal union is you have medical and health care power of attorney, so to speak, over those individuals without having to pay an attorney to formulate some kind of agreement that would give you rights over that person's medical record. When you have a family member, for instance, the job that I have offers benefits, and all I have to do is say, I want this person covered on my dental plan, and if they have a family relationship with me, then that benefit will be extended to my offspring, to my husband, these kinds of things. And so family has shared rights and privileges, and we're very general about what those are. I mean, I've given you a specific example, but we need to be very general about what those are because worldwide, the rights and privileges associated with family are very, very different. So, for instance, some families, say in India, for instance, it's very common that there is a privilege extended to elders in the family, such as the mother-in-law. There is a privilege that is expected that younger members of the family, primarily a son and a daughter-in-law, are going to keep the mother-in-law in the household with them until the end of her days. So there is no real advanced nursing home system or social security system because the family custom, the shared understanding of what you're supposed to do for family members is built into the customs on the macro scale. So there's supposed to be care and support for children, but also some of the privileges might be that when you yourself have children and they're, making children of their own, making families of their own, making children of their own, you have the privilege of staying with one of them. You are supposed to do that in order for those kids who married and are making a life of their own, in order for them to follow social conventions, to follow social norms, they are obliged to keep you in that house with them and offer you a support system, and you of course contribute to their livelihood also. And so in this chapter that we're going to read, the portion of chapter 5 that we're going to read this week, you're going to read about family, and you're going to read about marriage, you're going to read about divorce. So marriage is still assumed to be a significant part of the family tradition, the expectations in a family. That's an assumed part, and so divorce is something that is seen as a social problem. Perhaps divorce is not such a social problem in cultures where arranged marriages are the expectation. Maybe divorce is only a problem in societies where individuals are allowed to choose and have the freedom to choose who they're going to marry. You do see significantly different divorce rates from a society that has arranged marriages compared to a society that has the freedom to choose for the individuals. So this is something that you need to keep in mind, because this social problem that we're reading about might not be such an issue in other societies with a different social structure on the macro scale. So we have to keep reminding ourselves this and make sure that we are objective about the situation, because whatever the objective situation is will affect the perception, the subjectivity of whether we identify something as a social problem or not. So when you're reading this portion of the chapter that is assigned, please make sure that you focus on, that really broad-minded, really open-minded reading of the situation. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how traditional, typical, historical, whatever adjective you want to put in front of it, how historically families have been structured in the United States and elsewhere, and how the economic function of those individual families contribute to the economic structure of society. So that's another thing that's really going to come into play in future weeks when we look at social inequality, or even gender inequality, or even alcohol and drug abuse, these kinds of things, crime. These kinds of things are often, if you go back and look at general source work, a lot of times people say, well, you can find the source for this social problem, like crime, the last one I highlighted, back from the rights and privileges and care for the children part of the family and the economic ability that the family has or inability that the family has. And so there's a whole bunch of solutions to social problems that have their foundation in social problems that people cite in family structures. So we have a lot to think about this week. And in the next video, I'll show you some family diagrams on the board. There's a there's a website for you to click on to show you like what the different symbols mean that I'm using on the board. I use some kinship diagram symbols, and there's many others. I have a website that just shows you a picture of the symbols and what they mean. And then there's also a couple of curated videos for you this week where we'll look at a sociologist from, I think it was the 1950s, the 1960s, somewhere in that era. His name is escaping me right now. I'm sorry, I can't find his name for you right now, but one of the videos is about a fatherless society and fatherlessness in society and how potentially that is the root of some of the social problems that we have. And so there's some curated videos and some lesson videos for you. And so I hope that you will text me with questions, and I look forward to your work on the reaction papers this week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.